It was Eliza's housewarming day. The day she and her family were supposed to finally step into their new life. Family, laughter, warm lights, everything felt perfect. Until her husband and sister disappeared. That night, Eliza and her son slept on the floor. He said nothing, but Eliza knew he was hurting. She never expected that his words, just one sentence, would turn the world upside down. Eliza Morgan's hand trembled slightly as she accepted the keys from the real estate agent. Sunlight poured through the windows of the empty house, casting golden stripes across the wooden floor. It was their new beginning, a fresh chapter long overdue. But beneath her smile, something fragile fluttered, like she was grasping at a feeling that might slip away at any moment. Yes. Finally got my own room. 9-year-old Nolan bolted through the entryway, his sneakers thudding across bare floors, laughter echoing as he disappeared upstairs. His joy was unfiltered, contagious. Eliza watched, her lips curling into a smile. Finally, our home, she whispered, but the words tasted uncertain in her mouth. There was hope in her eyes, yes, but somewhere deep, a thread of unease had already begun to tug. Eliza moved room to room, her fingers grazing the soft gray wallpaper she had chosen herself, her first real choice in a long time. Pendant lights dangled like tiny moons from the ceiling, scattering soft glows across the clean, polished floors. Everything here bore her imprint, a space built by her, for them. At the window, she gently placed a framed photo of the three of them, herself, Nolan, and Vincent. Finally, a real family home, she thought. But as she stepped back and looked at the picture, something about the smile she wore in it made her pause. Was it always that stiff, or was she only noticing it now? Mom, look. My own sky. Nolan's voice floated from upstairs. She followed it to find him in his room, adjusting a star-shaped projector on the ceiling. Blue and white lights scattered like constellations across the walls. For a fleeting second, Eliza was no longer in this house. She was a little girl again, lying on a blanket beside her father beneath a meteor shower, the sky vast, full of wishes. Do you like it? Nolan asked, eyes shining. It's beautiful, honey, Eliza said softly, blinking back the rush of memory. But in her chest, something whispered, don't trust this piece. It's too quiet. Too perfect. In the kitchen, Eliza moved with practiced ease, arranging trays of appetizers while Nolan rinsed vegetables beside her. They worked in tandem, a quiet rhythm of small smiles and quick glances. The kitchen counter, marble-topped, wide and gleaming, was her dream. A symbol of effort, survival, and arrival. Mom, it's from Dad. Nolan handed her the phone. A message blinked on the screen, running late. We'll get there ASAP. Eliza's smile faltered for a heartbeat. This day had been planned for months. It was meant to be the day. She took a breath, buried the sting, and smiled again just as the doorbell rang. Her sister Audrey arrived with a breezy, hey. Hope I'm not too early, but her eyes roamed restlessly across the rooms, scanning furniture, light fixtures, decor, taking mental inventory. She's always been like this, Eliza thought while observing her. My shadow. Never far behind. Always watching. Always wanting. Soon the house buzzed with laughter and chatter. Relatives hugged, old friends clinked glasses, compliments flowed freely. Vincent arrived late, his smile wide but tired. Eliza moved to greet him, only to pause as she saw his eyes flick briefly across the room to meet Audrey's. The moment lasted less than a second. But it was enough to make her throat tighten. His phone buzzed again. He turned, shielding the screen from view, thumb tapping quickly. Eliza's stomach coiled. Audrey always said she wanted to be just like you, remember? An older aunt laughed to no one in particular. Eliza chuckled softly, but her eyes locked on Audrey's, just in time to see a flicker of something dark pass across her sister's face. Let's take a group photo. Eliza called, trying to capture the day, anchoring it in something solid. But Vincent muttered, I've got to take this, and stepped away with his phone. Audrey chimed in, I'll just fix my makeup, and vanished in the opposite direction. They didn't return in time for the photo. Dishes clinked softly in the sink as Eliza washed them alone in the kitchen. Through the window, she spotted Vincent and Audrey in the garden, wine glasses in hand, heads close in conversation. Then Audrey laughed and lightly touched Vincent's arm. A knife of cold dread slid through Eliza's chest. She pressed her lips together, shook her head. No. It's nothing. I'm overthinking. They're family. Mom. Nolan's voice made her jump. He stood behind her, eyes large and watchful. What are you thinking about? He asked, his voice quiet, too mature for his age. Eliza wiped her hands dry, plastered on a smile. Nothing, sweetie. But as she turned back to the window, her heart grew heavier. She watched Vincent glance at his phone again, this time turning it slightly away from Audrey. Why does this day feel like it's holding its breath? Why does joy come wrapped in warning signs? She swallowed hard, trying to bury the question. But she already knew something was wrong. Something had already begun to unravel. As the party wound down, Vincent and Audrey looked more than just tired. Their faces were drawn, their smiles forced, like masks held up too long. From across the room, Eliza watched them. A knot tightened in her stomach with every passing second. We're running low on drinks. I'll run to the convenience store, Vincent said suddenly, pulling his keys from his pocket. I'll go too, Audrey chimed in quickly, already reaching for her purse. The ease in her voice couldn't quite hide the urgency in her step. Eliza followed them toward the door, wanting to ask if they needed anything. That's when she heard Vincent whisper, "Let's go. After tonight, we're done." The door closed with a soft click. But to Eliza, it sounded like a slammed gate shutting behind them. A chill ran down her spine as she stood frozen in the hallway. Minutes stretched into an hour. The clock ticked relentlessly as she called their phones over and over. No answer. No read receipts. Just silence. Where did those two disappear to? Relatives began murmuring. It's been over an hour, just for drinks? Eliza's mind raced, panic bubbling under the surface. A relative of Vincent's got sick suddenly. They had to leave, she lied with a brittle smile. It felt like her face might shatter from the strain of keeping it together. From across the room, she caught Nolan watching her quietly. His eyes, far too perceptive for his age, locked with hers. That gaze crushed her more than any whispered rumor ever could. Later, as she said goodbye to the final guest, an aunt hugged her cheerfully. We'll come visit again soon. Eliza forced a nod, the smile on her face stiff and aching. It was all she could do not to collapse. When the last car pulled away, silence settled over the house like dust. The rooms that had felt so warm that morning now echoed with cold emptiness. Even her footsteps felt intrusive. She tried calling them again. Vincent's phone went straight to voicemail. Audrey's rang until it didn't. No reply. Still nothing. She opened the fridge. Party leftovers, half a cake, cheese cubes, wine stared back at her under the harsh fridge light. Nothing Nolan could eat for breakfast. Grocery shopping had been their task. One they clearly had no intention of finishing. I can't believe this is happening, she whispered, slowly closing the fridge door. In the living room, she laid out a blanket on the hardwood floor. The irony cut deep, first night in their dream home, and she couldn't even offer her son a real bed. The furniture wasn't arriving until tomorrow. Nolan curled up beside her, pressing his small body close for comfort. Mom. He whispered into the darkness. They're coming back, right? Eliza stared up at the bare ceiling. Tears slipped silently down her temples, soaking into her hair. And still, she couldn't bring herself to answer. Morning light streamed through the uncurtained windows, harsh and unforgiving. Eliza checked her phone immediately, no missed calls, no messages, and her previous texts still unread. With trembling hands, she dialed her mother-in-law's number. Eliza? Why are you calling so early? Patricia's voice sounded guarded. I'm sorry to bother you. Is Vincent with you? Eliza asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Vincent? No, he's not here. What's going on? Eliza heard the hesitation in Patricia's voice before she continued, if you mean the two of them, they mentioned something about taking a trip. Wait, didn't they tell you? The call ended abruptly, leaving Eliza standing frozen in the middle of the empty living room. Her eyes fell on the catering bill, paid entirely on her credit card. Her only one. With trembling fingers, she checked her bank account. Nearly empty. The savings account, too, drained. The phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. The full weight of reality had finally arrived. That evening, Eliza sat on the edge of Nolan's bed, hunched forward as though the entire world was pressing down on her back. The soft glow from the star-shaped nightlight barely reached the sorrow carved into her face. Mom, Nolan whispered, his voice trembling in the silence. Is this my fault? The question pierced her heart. She wrapped her arms tightly around his small frame. No. Absolutely not, she said fiercely, even as her voice cracked. This has nothing to do with you. Tears she had been holding in all day spilled down her cheeks. She tried to hide them, but Nolan felt the dampness on his shoulder. Without a word, he walked across the room and turned off the nightlight. The room plunged into darkness. The gesture spoke louder than words. The magic of their new beginning had been extinguished. In the silence, Eliza stared out the window at the vast, empty sky. Why? She whispered. The stars above offered no answer, only their cold, distant light. Half-unpacked boxes lined the stained walls of their new one-bedroom apartment. After that, they moved from their new house to a small apartment. She sat on a second-hand couch, staring blankly at the news. Looks like someone's already buying our house, she murmured in a hollow voice. A box in the corner held the star-shaped nightlight, wrapped in tissue. Nolan hadn't asked to use it since the move. He brought it, but never touched it. The mailbox had become a daily ritual of dread. Eliza opened an envelope addressed to Vincent Morgan, a final notice for a gambling debt she never knew existed. How did I miss this? She whispered, staring at the astronomical numbers. At the employment office, Eliza sat across from an interviewer who scanned her resume with a tight smile. There's quite a gap in your work history. And your husband. Family circumstances have changed, Eliza replied, watching the woman's polite interest fade to quiet judgment. Later, at the supermarket, Eliza compared prices line by line. If I skip meat this week, she muttered, calculator in hand, we'll be okay till Friday. The basket was light. But the weight on her shoulders grew heavier with every step. People whispered behind her back, loud enough to sting. I heard her husband ran off with her sister. There must have been something wrong with her. At Nolan's school, other mothers huddled together in easy conversation. Eliza sat alone, their glances like needles. One evening, after a failed job interview, she found a paper bag outside her door. Inside it vegetables, milk, bread, a chocolate bar. And a note, your voice has been heard. It wasn't the food. It was the reminder that someone, anyone, had seen her. Mom, are you crying? Nolan asked from the hallway. No, sweetie, she said, wiping her face. These are happy tears. Someone did something kind for us. Nolan said nothing. But he understood everything. Mrs. Morgan? This is Ms. Harlow, Nolan's teacher. Eliza's heart sank as she got a call from the school. I'm concerned about Nolan. He's been withdrawn, he avoids his friends and spends recess alone. That night, Eliza found a drawing in Nolan's backpack. A house split in two. A small woman crying in the corner. Nolan, do you want to talk about your drawing? She asked softly. He shook his head. A few days later, while eating dinner in silence, Nolan spoke suddenly. They were talking in the hallway again. I'm good at pretending not to notice things. What? Who was talking? Nothing, he whispered, falling quiet again. His words, cryptic and heavy, hung between them like a fog. Eliza wanted to ask more, but sensed the burden inside him was too big to force out. A bright envelope from school arrived, stamped with cheerful stickers. Parent-child presentation day, it read in bold, colorful letters. Eliza set it gently on the dining table and stared at it for a long time. Now. Of all times, she murmured. The timing felt like a cruel joke. What will you present? She asked Nolan, trying to sound upbeat. It's a secret, he replied, with a flicker of excitement, his old spark peeking through. Nolan, I'm not sure if. Please come, he interrupted, his eyes suddenly intense. I really need you there, Mom. There was something raw and urgent in his voice. Refusing wasn't an option. Okay, she said quietly. I'll be there. That night, with Nolan asleep, Eliza opened her laptop. She began typing an email to Vincent and Audrey. The days of waiting for you both to return are over. Her finger hovered over the send button. The cursor blinked like a dare. But instead of sending it, she saved the draft and closed the laptop. Not yet. Not tonight. She glanced toward Nolan's room, a strange mixture of dread and anticipation filling her chest. Whatever he was preparing, it felt big. Honest. And maybe even dangerous. Can I see your script? Eliza asked gently, sitting on the edge of Nolan's bed. It's a secret, he said, holding his notebook to his chest like a treasure. You're not going to say anything that might embarrass us, right? She teased, then regretted it immediately as his expression darkened. No, he said softly. Then, looking into her eyes, added, I always watch you, Mom. I see everything. His words carried a weight far beyond his years. Eliza sat in stunned silence. The classroom buzzed with chatter and excitement. Mothers wore coordinated outfits, fathers in business casual. Eliza felt out of place in her wrinkled blouse and worn slacks, the best she had left. Nolan squeezed her hand. It's okay, Mom. You look pretty. She smiled, blinked fast, and sat at the back. Children went up one by one, some with science projects, others with songs or skits. Laughter and applause filled the room. Mrs. Morgan, came a gentle voice. Eliza looked up to see Ms. Harlow. Nolan seems focused today, she said softly. Whatever he's planning, it's very important to him. Eliza nodded as she braced herself for his presentation. Next up, Nolan Morgan, Ms. Harlow announced. He walked slowly to the front of the room. The chatter died instantly. For a moment, he stood there silently, scanning the room, until his eyes found his mother's. And then he spoke, my mom cried alone. A pause. Not a sound in the room. My dad and my mom's sister left us. Another pause. Eliza's heart pounded. Mom had no money. Sometimes she didn't eat. And finally, but I told her something. Mom, I'm here. I'll always be on your side. The simplicity. The clarity. The truth. It slammed into the room like a thunderclap. No one moved. No one breathed. The silence was absolute. Oh my God. Someone whispered. Tears ran down Ms. Harlow's face. She tried to maintain her composure but failed. Thank you, Nolan, she said with a trembling voice. That was very powerful. In the back row, Eliza was frozen. Embarrassment, heartbreak, pride, awe, all collided at once. Tears streamed freely down her face. Other parents wiped their eyes. Some looked away feeling uncomfortable. Others looked at Eliza, this time with respect. In the hallway afterward, Nolan ran to her. She dropped to her knees and wrapped him in her arms. Was it okay? He whispered. It was perfect, she whispered back. The next morning, Eliza's phone buzzed nonstop. A parent had posted about Nolan's speech. A 9-year-old boy told the truth about being abandoned by his dad and aunt. He stood by his mother with pride. I've never seen anything so brave. The post had gone viral. That afternoon, Ms. Harlow called Eliza in. The school would like to help, she said. Counseling. Emergency funds. Why didn't you tell us? I was ashamed, Eliza admitted. I didn't want Nolan to be the kid everyone pitied. He's not pitied, Ms. Harlow replied. He's admired. By the weekend, the story reached local news. The headline read, "Boy's brave words bring a community to tears." Social media exploded. Vincent and Audrey's names were exposed. Their employers were tagged. Their profiles flooded with backlash. Did I do something bad? Nolan asked. No, honey. You told the truth. And sometimes, truth changes things. For the better, he asked. For the better, Eliza said, holding him close. Definitely for the better. Eliza's phone hadn't stopped ringing since Nolan's presentation. Strangers sent messages of support. Is this Eliza Morgan? An authoritative female voice asked when Eliza answered an unknown number. Yes. Eliza replied cautiously. My name is Ramona Winters. I'm a family law attorney. I'd like to help you with your divorce proceedings, pro bono, of course. When they met the next day at Ramona's office, the well-dressed woman had a familiar warmth about her. Why would you help someone you don't know? Eliza asked. Ramona smiled. That note you found, your voice has been heard, I signed it. Winters. I hoped you'd remember. Eliza's eyes widened. You're the one who gave the food to us. I did. When I was 10, my mother was in a similar situation. I just happened to find out about yours. When I saw your son's presentation. She paused, composing herself. His words could have been my own, 30 years ago. I want to help. In the weeks that followed, more support emerged. A single mothers group invited her to join. The school established a fund for families in crisis. Slowly, Eliza began to feel less alone. 2 weeks later, Eliza's phone displayed a notification she never expected, an email from Vincent. Subject, Audrey and I weren't like that. Eliza stared at the screen for 1 second before closing her eyes and swiping left. Delete. No explanation could justify abandoning their son. Later that day, a text from Audrey arrived, your light was too bright. I spent my whole life trying to catch up, and all I did was lose myself. Eliza read it twice, then set her phone down without replying. It doesn't matter anymore, she whispered. Through a former colleague, she heard that Vincent had been fired after the social media firestorm. He and Audrey were struggling, moving from town to town as their reputations followed them. How do you feel about that? Her colleague asked carefully. Nothing, Eliza answered truthfully. I feel nothing at all. 1 month later, Eliza sat at a small desk, finishing an article. She had found work as a freelance writer, specializing in pieces about children's emotional welfare. Her first essay, The Unfiltered Truth, What Children See When Adults Look Away, had gone viral, leading to a regular column. Their financial situation was still tight, but no longer desperate. Food appeared regularly on their table, and Eliza had started saving for a better apartment. At school, Nolan had begun talking to classmates again. Ms. Harlow reported that his participation in class had improved dramatically. After dinner one evening, as Eliza cleared the plates, Nolan suddenly spoke. Mom, I'm sorry about what I said at school. But I knew. I always knew about Dad and Aunt Audrey. Eliza froze, a plate was suspended midair. What do you mean, you knew? I saw them talking in the hallway at our old house, lots of times. I heard things. His voice was calm. I didn't tell you because I thought it would make you sad. Eliza sat down heavily, stunned by this revelation. Since when have you known? Since a long time ago. before we even moved to the new house. He looked at her with eyes too wise for his age. You're really strong, Mom. Eliza reached across the table and took his small hand in hers. I'm strong because of you. You saved me, Nolan. Not the other way around. A sunset painted the sky in amber and violet as Eliza and Nolan sat on a park bench, enjoying the spring evening. What do you think about taking a small trip this summer? Eliza asked, surprising herself with the suggestion. For months, she had thought only of survival, not pleasure. Really? Where to? Nolan's eyes lit up with excitement. Wherever we want. Somewhere with a good view of the stars, maybe. Mom, look. Nolan pointed upward. You can see a star already, even though it's not dark yet. Eliza tilted her head back. There it was, a single bright point in the dusky sky. Yes, I see it. You don't cry at night anymore, Nolan observed quietly. No, I don't, she agreed. The stars are always there now. When we get a new house someday, can I help choose it? He asked. Absolutely. It will be our decision, together. That night, after Nolan had fallen asleep, Eliza tiptoed into his room. The star-shaped nightlight sat unused on his dresser since they had moved to the apartment. She picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in her hands. Memories flooded back, of watching a meteor shower with her father as a child, of that magical feeling of possibility. Now, watching her son's peaceful sleeping form, she felt that same sense of wonder returning. We don't need someone else's dreams anymore. We've found our own light, she whispered, plugging in the nightlight and switching it on. Stars immediately danced across the ceiling and walls. Eliza sat by the window, gazing alternately at the artificial stars inside and the real ones beginning to appear outside. In her heart, she made a silent promise, I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. Not when I have this star beside me. I won't wait to be chosen anymore. I choose myself. I choose us. And with that promise glowing quietly in her heart, Eliza Morgan took the first step toward a life illuminated by stars of her own making.